This is another video about weaving. I'm outdoors. I'm at my warping frame, and what you see on the ground here is a fully warped 32-inch Kromsky heddle on purple wood beams as a backstrap loom. Now, this is the widest fabric I normally weave. I used to have a Kromsky Harp 32-inch wide loom, but the table space it takes is hard to come by, so I switched to a backstrap loom. And what I'm going to be doing today is just tightening up the warp on the front beams, putting a second beam in front of those knots, securing those two beams together, and then putting on my backstrap loom. So this gives you 32-inch wide fabric. And when you look at it now, it's not as wide as you might think in your mind of 32-inch fabric. Also, this is a big, somewhat cumbersome project. Normally I hang it from the ceiling hooks in my living room, but I happen to have a chair in the way now. I have a new glider. So I've come up with an alternative if you're going to use the 32-inch loom. I took, you see also here a frame loom. This is my Pipe Loom. And it's a vertical loom that's very versatile. I can do several types of weaving on it. But if you picture two verticals like that, without a crossbar at the top, behind the headboard of your bed, you're creating like a false headboard. I had an 8-foot piece of oak molding. I cut it in half, so I had two 4-foot tall sticks that are 3-inch wide oak molding. It's not going to move, it's not going to bend. I put it behind the bed, and I put two cup hooks, one at each top of the post. So I can now take the beam, the back beam there, hang it on the cup hooks, and work from the end of my bed up over my bed. Now, when you get to the end of the bed, which is like, let's say 5 or 6 feet long, then all of a sudden, are you on top of the bed? What are you doing? What you do at that point, normally when I hang this, I hang it with a rope that you can see right here. It's attached to the beam. You take this and you tie this with another rope to the cup hook supports, and you basically let the beam be like way down here, or like the middle of a bed, or even the end of the bed, and you're just using the false headboard as a way to string up your loom, and you'd have like a 4 or 5 foot rope keeping the back beam suspended as you weave. It's an alternative. I also have, I attached large cup hooks to little pieces of wood, and have big C-clamps, where you can also C-clamp 2 hooks to any table and just suspend the beams from the same type of extra large cup hooks. They're like 1.5 inches big, really big ones, and you can get them as big as like 3 or 4 inches, strong enough to support a bike. So you don't have to worry about the weight of the back beams, as long as you have the right kind of cup hooks and strong oak for a false headboard. So it's an alternative. It's freezing out here this morning. I had wanted to work on this project. I'm going to make a blanket, and this is why I have the other loom out here. This is 32 inches wide. It's warped with very fine cotton warp, and it isn't going to take me long to weave this length, which is about maybe 8 feet. You know, so it's not an overly long project unless I was going to do like hand-spun cotton and had to spin the cotton as I go. But it's too chilly out now to really work on this outside, which is why I came up with the different ways of using the loom indoors. But this 32-inch wide fabric I have a new grandson, and this is going to be a Christmas present. Don't tell him. He's only 2 weeks old. I'm going to make an Afghan in blue and white. The white is going to be representing little stars, and the blue is going to be the night before Christmas, and that's the name of the blanket. So I'm sending it to him and his parents, my son and his wife and the baby, for Christmas as like a couch Afghan or something the night before Christmas. But 32 inches wide. I've also made bedroll mats this wide, and they can be like an Afghan type blanket or even an extra wide shawl that you throw over yourself, but it's not normally a bed-sized blanket. So I have this other loom here to mention to you. This is the Pipe Loom. The Pipe Loom only weaves 11 inches wide. It's about 16 or 17 inches wide, but the actual weaving ends up about 11 inches. And you would think, wow, what am I going to make with 11 inches wide? Well, I have it set up now for the continuous warp method of warping this loom, which means the loom itself is 36 inches tall, but by the time you have your fringe allowed for and everything, I'm going to end up with like a 40-inch fabric. And I warp it for a continuous warp. This actually ends up being the warp bar, which moves down to the bottom, and you work one side, then you pull this in between the legs and wrap it around, and you keep weaving. It'll give me a 40-inch, roughly 40-inch wide fabric. So how does that give me a blanket? I turn them horizontal. I make 6 panels, 40 inches by 11 inches, and instead of sewing them together the long way, they would be like this, and you sew them top to bottom. So when you think, oh wow, I can only afford a 16-inch loom, one of my looms, my table looms, is the Harrisville Designs Easy Weaver that is 16 inches wide. It weaves 14 inches wide. I put a 6-foot warp on that, and I have a 6-foot wide blanket section that then you sew together in stripes. And so you'd be hand sewing the warped edge together to make a left to right blanket with the fringe on the left and on the right instead of the fringe on the top and on the bottom, which is like this when you do it all in one piece. So don't get discouraged when you see the prices of looms, or if a 32-inch wide fabric and an 8-foot length is a little bit daunting, if it might, be a little overwhelming at the beginning. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and get a smaller loom, and the thing to look for is what's the longest warp you can put on it. If you can put a 5-foot or a 6-foot warp on a narrow loom, you can make a blanket that's 5 or 6 feet wide.